Absolutely not.
Caroline Whitfield didn't even turn around. She just waved her hand, as if shooing away a fly.
Ma'am, I speak French. I can help you.
Only then did she turn, her gaze fixed on his skin, then on his uniform.
Help!
She almost whispered.
Look at you. A black man driving?
Ma'am, I speak fluent French. I can...
What can you do? Walk into a room full of European investors looking like that, talking like that.
She stepped closer.
Black men think everything is easy, don't they? People like you are only fit to be a valet.
Langston stood motionless, completely calm.
You're about to lose 200 million, ma'am. I can stop it.
She looked at him as if he were insane. What she didn't know was that French wasn't even his best language. Here's what you need to understand about that moment. Caroline Whitfield had no one. Her professional translator had canceled 30 minutes ago. The French delegation, led by a man named Jean-Luc Renault, had been sitting in the conference room for 20 minutes. Nobody on her staff spoke a word of French. And every second that passed, 200 million euros drifted closer to the door. This wasn't just a deal. This was survival. Without that money, Whitfield Capital wouldn't make it through the quarter. Hundreds of jobs gone. So when Langston Harris, the man she'd just told to go back to the car where he belonged, stood there offering help, Caroline did the only thing a desperate person does. She gave in, but not with grace. Fine, she said it through her teeth. You want to play translator? Here's how this works. She stepped so close he could smell her perfume. You say exactly what I tell you to say. Word for word. Nothing more. You don't add, you don't improvise, you don't think. You are a speaker, a machine. You understand? Yes, ma'am. And if you say one wrong word, one single word that costs me this deal, you're done. Not just this job. I will make sure you never drive in this city again. I understand, ma'am. She turned and walked toward the conference room, then stopped. What's your name? 3 years. 3 years he'd driven her car, opened her door, stood in the rain holding her umbrella. She'd never asked. Langston, ma'am. Langston Harris. She didn't repeat it, didn't acknowledge it. She just said, "Don't make me regret this." They walked into the conference room. 4 French investors in tailored suits looked up. Jean-Luc Renault sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, visibly irritated. Caroline didn't introduce Langston, didn't say his name, didn't explain who he was. She just pointed at the French delegation and said one word. Go. Like she was giving a command to a dog. Langston looked at the room, then he opened his mouth. And everything changed. Langston took one breath. Just one. A small pause. The kind nobody notices. Unless you're the one standing in a room where nobody believes you belong. He looked at the table. 4 French investors in tailored suits. Jean-Luc Renault at the head, arms crossed, jaw set like stone. 20 minutes of dead silence had already done its damage. The energy in that room wasn't just cold, it was hostile. Then Langston spoke. Not broken phrases, not tourist vocabulary, not the kind of French you pick up from a phone app on a flight to Paris. He spoke the way a native Parisian speaks, fluid, musical, precise. Every syllable landing exactly where it should, every word flowing into the next like it was the most natural thing in the world. He started with an apology, calm, measured, respectful. He told them the interpreter had a sudden emergency. He told them Ms. Whitfield considered this partnership so important that she personally came down to make sure nothing fell apart. That last part, Caroline never said it. Langston added it on his own. Because he understood something no one else in that room did. The French delegation wasn't just frustrated about the wait. They were insulted. In French business culture, leaving guests sitting unattended for 20 minutes sends a very specific message. It says, "You are not important to us." Langston read that the second he walked in. He felt it in the stiffness of their posture, the tightness of Jean-Luc's jaw, The way the other three investors had stopped making small talk with each other. These men were ready to leave. Not in 10 minutes. Now. And Langston fixed it. Before Caroline asked. Before anyone asked. Jean-Luc uncrossed his arms. Slowly. He leaned forward in his chair. Then he responded in rapid French. Fast, dense, technical. The kind of speed that's designed to expose a fake. The kind of speed that says, prove it. Langston didn't stumble, didn't hesitate, didn't glance at a single note. He matched Jean-Luc sentence for sentence, adjusting his tone when the conversation shifted, moving between formal and conversational registers like he'd been doing this his entire life. The meeting found its rhythm. Caroline spoke the way she always did, short, blunt, American. We need a commitment by end of month. Langston didn't translate that directly. A demand like that would land like a slap in a French boardroom. It would undo everything he'd just built. So he reshaped it, softened the edges, turned it from an ultimatum into an invitation, the way French executives expect business to be discussed. And when Jean-Luc responded with a long, winding answer, full of careful hedging, the kind that most Americans hear as a flat no, Langston leaned toward Caroline and said quietly, "He's not refusing, ma'am. He needs to bring this to his board first. In French business culture, that's actually a positive signal. It means they're seriously considering it." Caroline looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time in 3 years. Not with respect. Not yet. With confusion. The deep, uncomfortable kind that happens when reality crashes straight into every assumption you've ever made about a person. 45 minutes. That's how long the meeting lasted. 45 minutes of Langston translating not just words, but intent, culture, emotion. The invisible architecture of how people from different worlds learn to trust each other. When it ended, Jean-Luc stood and shook hands around the table. But when he reached Langston, he stopped. He held Langston's hand with both of his, a gesture that carries deep weight in European business, and spoke to him directly, in French, quietly, just between them. What he said, translated loosely, "Your ability deserves far better than how you are being treated here. I hope the people around you learn to see what I see." He said, "the people around you." But his eyes moved toward Caroline as the words left his mouth. The delegation didn't pull their money. They agreed to keep going. 200 million euros stayed inside Whitfield Capital. The company survived. And Caroline? She stood in the doorway after they left, looked at Langston, and said, "Not bad. But next time, just translate. Don't add. Don't interpret. I hired a speaker, not a thinker." She walked away, heels clicking on marble. No pause. No thank you. Not even his name. Langston stood alone in the empty conference room. He'd just saved 200 million euros, kept hundreds of people employed, pulled her company back from the edge of collapse. And what he got was, "Not bad. Don't think." He walked to the car, sat in the driver's seat, placed a small, worn leather notebook next to the gear shift, closed the door. Silence. To understand what Langston Harris carried in that leather notebook, you have to go back 22 years, back to a kitchen table in North Philadelphia. Langston was 12, skinny arms, second-hand clothes, sitting under a light that buzzed and flickered because nobody had the money to fix it. His mother, Dorothy Harris, had just come home from an 8-hour night shift mopping floors at Temple University Hospital. Her back ached. Her hands smelled like bleach. She was so tired she could barely stand. But she set something on the table before she sat down. A French-English dictionary. Beaten up, dog-eared. Found in a donation bin at the hospital that afternoon. "Somebody threw this away," she said. "Thought maybe you'd want it." Langston opened it like it was made of gold. That night, in a small, cramped handwriting, he copied his first 2 words into a blank notebook. "Hello. "Thank you," in French, in pencil. He was 12 years old. That notebook never left his side again. See, what most people don't know about North Philadelphia is that it's one of the most multilingual places in America. Not because of any program, not because of any school, because of the people who live there. The man who ran the corner store spoke Spanish and Portuguese. The butcher 3 blocks down spoke Arabic. The family across the hall had come from Senegal. They spoke French and Wolof. And the elderly Russian woman on the 3rd floor taught Langston to read her language in exchange for him carrying her groceries up the stairs every Saturday. Every language Langston learned came from a relationship, an act of kindness given, an act of kindness returned. No classroom, no tutor, just a kid who listened, and a neighborhood that talked. 9 languages, all by the age of 30. And not a single person at Whitfield Capital had ever thought to ask. Every morning, his 6-year-old daughter Zoe asked him the same question. "Daddy, are you going to be a driver forever?" And every morning, he gave her the same answer. "I'll be whatever gets you what you need, baby." 9 languages. 0 people who knew. The next morning, something unusual happened. Someone came looking for Langston. Not to hand him car keys, not to tell him where to drive. Someone came to talk to him. Thomas Ashford, Senior Vice President of Global Strategy at Whitfield Capital, walked down to the parking garage. Not the lobby, not a conference room. The parking garage, where Langston sat every day, alone, eating whatever his mother had packed him the night before. Most executives would have sent an email, or had an assistant make a call, or summoned Langston upstairs like a package being delivered. Thomas didn't do that. He walked down, found Langston leaning against the black Lincoln, and introduced himself with a handshake. "Mr. Harris," Langston blinked. 3 years at this company. Nobody, not once, had ever called him that. Not Langston, not driver, not hey or you. Mr. Harris. Like he was a person who had earned a name. "Nina told me what happened yesterday," Thomas said. 45 minutes of live translation, no notes, no preparation. And from what I hear, you didn't just translate. You read the room better than anyone on my team. "I just helped out, sir." Thomas studied him for a moment. Calm eyes, patient. "How many languages do you speak, Mr. Harris?" Silence. A long one. Langston had never been asked that question by anyone in power. He'd learned a long time ago that revealing too much to the wrong person could backfire. People don't like it when you turn out to be more than they decided you were. It makes them uncomfortable. And uncomfortable people find ways to push you back down. But something about Thomas Ashford felt different. The man had come downstairs. He'd used his name. 9, sir." Thomas didn't gasp, didn't widen his eyes. He just nodded, slowly, like a man who'd been searching for something and had finally found it. "We have a Japanese tech delegation arriving Friday. High-level semiconductor deal, $500 million. Their English is limited, and I don't trust the usual agency translators to handle the nuance." He paused. "Would you be willing to sit in?" That night, Langston parked outside his mother's apartment. He called her. "Mama, they want me to translate for a real meeting. Japanese investors. A man named Thomas actually came down to ask me himself." Dorothy was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You've been ready your whole life, baby. The only thing that changed is someone finally opened the door." He hung up. Opened the leather notebook to the Japanese section. Pages of handwritten characters, grammar rules, verb conjugations. Meticulous. Beautiful. Years of work that no one had ever seen. But not everyone at Whitfield Capital shared Thomas Ashford's vision. Derek Caldwell, head of corporate communications, walked into Thomas's office the next morning with a very different opinion. "Tom, you're putting an unvetted driver with no credentials in front of a $500 million delegation? If this blows up, it's on us." Thomas didn't raise his voice. If it works, it's because we saw what was right in front of us. Derek went straight to Caroline. Did you hear? Thomas is using your driver for the Japanese meeting. Caroline leaned back in her chair and laughed. Actually laughed. Let him. If the driver embarrasses himself, that's Thomas's problem. At least I'm not paying for a translator this time. They laughed together. About Langston. Like he was a joke someone told at a dinner party. But Friday was coming, and the Japanese delegation wasn't bringing just investors. They were bringing a test that nobody in that building saw coming. Word travels fast in a building full of people with nothing better to do than talk about each other. By Thursday afternoon, everyone at Whitfield Capital knew. The driver, the parking guy, was going to translate for the Japanese delegation. A $500 million meeting with a man who didn't have a degree, didn't have a title, and up until 48 hours ago, didn't have a name anyone bothered to learn. The reactions came quick. A junior analyst in the break room smirked over his coffee. What's next? The janitor runs our quarterly audit? A managing director on the 14th floor raised an eyebrow when he heard. Is this some kind of PR stunt? Two women from HR passed each other in the hallway, exchanged a look, and kept walking. They didn't need to say it out loud. The look said everything. Nobody asked whether Langston was qualified. Nobody asked how many languages he spoke, or how he learned them, or what he'd done in that French meeting the day before. Nobody asked anything at all. They just decided. The way people always decide about someone they've already filed away in a box labeled, "Not one of us." Friday morning, 6:45. Langston arrived early. He always arrived early. But today felt different. The air felt heavier. The hallways felt longer. He walked through the lobby in his driver's uniform, black jacket, black pants, shoes he'd polished by hand the night before. Because nobody had told him to wear anything else. He didn't own a business suit. He pressed the elevator button for the 32nd floor. The doors opened. A woman in a silk blouse was already inside. She smiled at him, the automatic polite kind, then noticed which button he pressed. The executive floor. The smile disappeared. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The silence said it all. What are you doing up here? You don't belong on this floor. You don't belong in this world. The elevator opened. Langston stepped out. The hallway smelled like expensive cologne and fresh flowers. The carpet was so thick his worn shoes made no sound at all. And then a voice. Langston. Nina Dawson was standing by the hallway window, holding a garment bag. She looked at his uniform, then at his face, and something in her expression softened. My brother's, she said, holding it out. He's about your size. Langston looked at the bag, then at Nina. You don't need it, she said. You could walk in there wearing a tracksuit and still outperform every person in the room. But I don't want them to have a single excuse not to listen to you. He took the bag. Inside was a navy blue suit. Clean, pressed, simple but sharp. Thank me by making them forget every assumption they walked in with, Nina said. Langston changed in the restroom at the end of the hall. He stood in front of the mirror and adjusted the collar. For the first time in 3 years, the man looking back at him wasn't the driver, wasn't the parking guy, wasn't the invisible man who stood by the door and waited for instructions. He was just himself. He reached into his old uniform jacket, pulled out the leather notebook, and placed it in the inside breast pocket of the borrowed suit, right over his heart. Then he looked in the mirror one more time and walked out. Clothes don't make the man, but sometimes, they clear the road so the man can finally be seen. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows. Philadelphia stretched out below like a painting. Gray sky, old brick, glass towers catching what little winter light there was. Hiro Tanabe walked in first. CEO of one of Tokyo's largest semiconductor companies. Behind him, 3 senior executives, all in impeccable dark suits, all carrying themselves with the kind of quiet authority that doesn't need to announce itself. They bowed. Not slightly. A full, deliberate bow. The kind that carries meaning in Japanese business. The kind that says, "We take this seriously, and we expect you to do the same." The Whitfield team nodded back, awkwardly, stiffly, like people who'd read about bowing in a textbook once and forgotten everything except the word. The cultural gap was already visible, and the meeting hadn't even started. Then Langston stepped forward. He bowed. Not the shallow, rushed kind that most Westerners attempt. A proper bow, calibrated precisely to the formality of the room. Deep enough to show respect. Measured enough to show he understood the hierarchy. The kind of bow that takes years of cultural understanding, not a 5-minute briefing. Then he introduced himself in Japanese. Not textbook Japanese. Not the stiff, robotic phrases you hear in language courses. He spoke in keigo, the ultra-formal register used exclusively in high-level Japanese business. It's a form of the language so complex, so layered with social meaning, that even many native Japanese speakers struggle with it. Langston spoke it like he was born into it. Hiro Tanabe's eyes widened. Just slightly. Just enough. He responded in rapid Japanese. Testing, probing, pushing. The way a master tests someone who claims to understand the craft. Langston didn't miss a beat. The meeting unfolded over 90 minutes. And what Langston did in that room went far beyond translation. When Thomas Ashford made a proposal, direct, American style, straight to the point, Langston reshaped it. He softened the edges. Reframed it in the indirect, consensus-driven language that Japanese executives need to hear before they can say yes. When Hiro responded with a carefully worded hesitation, the kind of answer that sounds like nothing but means everything, Langston turned to Thomas and explained, "He's not saying no, sir. He's saying he needs to bring this to his board, and he wants you to understand the weight of that step. In Japanese business, this is respect, not resistance." Then came the moment that made the room go still. A technical term surfaced, a specific semiconductor supply chain concept, highly specialized. The conversation hit a wall. Nobody on the Whitfield side knew the term. Even Thomas looked lost. Langston paused for half a second. Then he explained the concept, clearly, accurately, in both Japanese and English. He referenced an article from a Japanese engineering journal he'd read 6 months earlier, for fun. Hiro Tanabe stared at him. Then slowly, he smiled. The kind of smile that says, "I don't know who you are, but I know what you are." After the meeting, Thomas Ashford leaned back in his chair. He didn't say a word. He just looked at Langston with the quiet expression of a man watching something rare. Caroline Whitfield was watching too, standing behind the glass partition. She'd come to observe, maybe out of curiosity, maybe hoping to see him fail. Her face wasn't admiration. Not yet. It was confusion. Deep, uncomfortable confusion. The kind that happens when the person you dismissed turns out to be the most capable one in the room. And in the corner, Derek Caldwell sat with his notebook open. His pen had stopped moving 5 minutes ago. 90 minutes. A $500 million deal saved by a man in a borrowed suit. The door to Caroline's office closed with a soft click. Thomas Ashford stood across from her desk. Neither of them sat down. "You saw what I saw in there," Thomas said. Caroline didn't answer right away. She turned toward the window. Philadelphia's skyline reflected back at her. Cold, gray, indifferent. He translated well, I'll give him that. He didn't translate, Caroline. She turned back. He read the room. He read the culture. He read intentions that our entire strategy team missed. He caught a technical concept that none of our analysts could explain, and he broke it down in 2 languages without blinking. Thomas paused. That's not translation. That's strategy. Caroline folded her arms, a wall going up. A bird that can sing doesn't mean it can fly. The words hung in the air. Thomas let them hang. Did you just compare him to a bird? I'm saying that interpreting and strategic thinking are two very different things, Thomas. And I'm saying you watched a man do both simultaneously for 90 minutes, in a language he taught himself, in a suit he borrowed, with no preparation, no credentials, and no support from anyone in this building except my assistant and a garment bag. Silence. Thomas stepped closer to the desk. I want to bring him on, not as a translator, as a cross-cultural strategy consultant. Someone who doesn't just speak languages, but understands how different cultures negotiate, build trust, and make decisions. That's what he does, Carolyn. That's what he's been doing his whole life. We just never asked. Carolyn exhaled, long and slow. Derek won't like it. Derek's job is to manage perception. My job is to find the people who change reality. Another silence. Longer this time. Caroline looked at the window again, then back at Thomas. Fine, do it. But if this falls apart, if he embarrasses this company in any way, it's your project, Thomas, not mine. Permission, not support, not endorsement. She was keeping her distance, close enough to take credit if it worked, far enough to point fingers if it didn't. Thomas nodded. He didn't argue. He knew that was the best he was going to get. For now. That afternoon, Thomas went looking for Langston. Not upstairs, not in a conference room. He went to the parking garage. Again. Because that's who Thomas Ashford was. The kind of leader who comes to you instead of summoning you. He found Langston by the Lincoln, back in his driver's uniform, the borrowed suit folded neatly on the passenger seat. Thomas extended his hand. I'd like to offer you a position, Mr. Harris. Not as a driver. Langston looked at the hand, then at his own. Calluses on the palms from 3 years of steering wheels and open doors. He shook it. What would I be doing? Thomas smiled. The kind of smile that's been waiting to happen. What you've been doing your whole life. Except now, people will actually be listening. That evening, Langston pulled up outside his mother's apartment building. The streetlights were just coming on. A thin layer of frost covered the windshield. The engine ticked as it cooled. Zoe was at the kitchen table when he walked in. Same table, same chair, same flickering light that had buzzed above that kitchen since Langston was a boy. She was bent over a worksheet, tongue poking out the side of her mouth, the way kids do when they're concentrating so hard the rest of the world disappears. She looked up when the door closed. Daddy, are you going to be a driver forever? The same question, every single day. The same little voice, the same big eyes, the same quiet worry that a 6-year-old shouldn't have to carry, but does anyway. Except tonight, for the first time, Langston gave a different answer. No, baby, I don't think so. Zoe tilted her head. She didn't fully understand, but she felt it. Something in her father's voice had shifted, like a door opening somewhere far away. She smiled, small and certain. From the doorway, Dorothy watched, arms folded across her chest, eyes wet. She didn't say a word. Later, after Zoe had fallen asleep on the couch, with her worksheet still in her hand, Langston and Dorothy sat on the front stoop. The street was quiet. A dog barked somewhere down the block. The cold air smelled like chimney smoke and old brick. Your father would have been so proud, Dorothy said. She wasn't looking at Langston. She was looking at the street, at something far away that only she could see. He spoke 3 languages himself, Creole, French, English. Never got to use any of them for anything but survival. I'm using them for both, Mama. She reached over and put her hand on top of his. Didn't squeeze, just rested it there, warm and steady. They sat like that for a long time. They didn't need to say anything else. When Langston went inside, he sat at the kitchen table, Zoe's worksheets pushed to one side, and opened the leather notebook to the very first page. There it was, in a child's handwriting, pencil, faded but still legible. Hello, thank you. His first two words in French, written at this exact table, under this exact light, 22 years ago. Below those two words, in adult handwriting, dozens of languages branched outward, page after page after page, like roots growing from a single seed. Every empire starts with one word. 2 weeks later, everything came to a head. Whitfield Capital's annual Global Partners Summit, the Kimmel Center, downtown Philadelphia. Delegations from 14 countries, 300 seats filled with investors, diplomats, ministers, and executives who collectively controlled more money than some nations. Caroline Whitfield was delivering the keynote. This was her stage, her moment, the culmination of a year-long international expansion strategy that would define the next decade of her company. Langston Harris sat in the third row. Officially, he was now a cross-cultural strategy consultant. He had a badge with his name on it, a seat at the table, a suit of his own this time, paid for with his first real paycheck. But the leather notebook was still in his breast pocket, right where it always was. He should have been at the center of this event. 2 deals saved, 2 languages proven, 9 available. Instead, he was sitting in the third row. Because of Derek Caldwell. Derek had gone to Caroline 3 days before the summit, privately, strategically, the way people like Derek always operate, not with a sword, but with a whisper. If the press finds out that our global strategist was parking cars 2 weeks ago, this becomes a circus. We'll look desperate, or worse, performative. I've arranged a professional interpreter, Georgetown graduate, certified, credentialed, resume you can actually show to a journalist. Caroline had hesitated. Even after everything she'd seen, something in her still couldn't fully let go, couldn't fully trust the man she'd called the driver. Fine, she said. Georgetown handles the main sessions. Langston sits back up. Back up. Third row. After everything. The summit began smoothly. Presentations, handshakes, coffee in porcelain cups. The Georgetown interpreter stood at the side of the stage, polished and professional, handling the opening sessions without incident. Then Sofia Marquez took the stage, Colombia's Minister of Infrastructure, a powerful woman with a commanding voice and a $1.2 billion Latin American infrastructure fund to present. Her English was strong, but imperfect. Strong enough for conversation, not strong enough for the precision that a room full of global investors demands. The Georgetown interpreter stood ready. Sophia began her presentation. Numbers, projections, returns, technical financial language. The kind where a single misplaced word can change the meaning of an entire sentence. And that's exactly what happened. The Georgetown interpreter, certified, credentialed, Georgetown educated, mistranslated a key term. A projected return became a guaranteed commitment. A forecast became a promise. One word, one wrong word. And suddenly, Sofia Marquez was telling a room full of 300 international investors that her fund was offering something it absolutely was not. A German investor raised his hand immediately. Minister Marquez, can you confirm that this is a guaranteed return? Because the documentation says otherwise. Sofia looked confused. She'd said the right thing in Spanish, she knew she had, but the English that reached the room was wrong. She turned to the interpreter. The interpreter froze, mouth open, eyes wide. The silence that followed lasted 4 seconds. In a room like that, 4 seconds is an eternity. Murmurs started. Delegates shifted in their seats. A ripple of doubt spread through the room like a crack in glass. 300 people, 14 countries, watching a $1 billion presentation fall apart in real time. Caroline Whitfield stood at the side of the stage. Her face went white. She looked at the Georgetown interpreter, the one with the degree, the credentials, the resume you could show to a journalist, standing frozen at the microphone. Then she looked at the third row, at Langston. Their eyes met, just for a moment, and in that moment, they both knew. Langston didn't wait for permission, didn't wait for a nod, a signal, a command. He stood up. The room turned. Derek Caldwell's jaw tightened. Langston walked to the stage, calm, steady, the way a man walks when he's been preparing for this moment his entire life without knowing it. He reached the podium, turned to Sophia, and in clear, fluent Spanish, he explained what had happened, calmly, precisely, respectfully. Sophia's shoulders dropped. She nodded. She understood. Then Langston turned to the room. He explained the mistranslation in English, identified the exact term that had been misinterpreted, broke down the difference between projected returns and guaranteed commitments in Latin American infrastructure financing, made it simple, made it clear, made it impossible to misunderstand. Then, without being asked, without a pause, without a single note, he repeated the correction in French. For the delegates from West Africa, Morocco, and Belgium. Then in Portuguese, for the Brazilian contingent. Then in Arabic, for the investors from the Gulf. 5 languages, 90 seconds, no notes. The room went dead silent. Then Sofia Marquez started clapping. Alone at first, one person. Then the German investor who'd raised the question joined. Then another. Then another. Then the entire room, 300 people, on their feet. Hiro Tanabe rose from the front row. He walked to Langston, placed both hands on his shoulders, a gesture so rare in Japanese culture that several people in the room visibly reacted, and spoke to him in Japanese. What he said, translated, "It is people like you who connect the world." Langston answered him, in Japanese. And for the first time, the very first time, his voice cracked, just barely, just enough. And Caroline Whitfield, she stood at the side of the stage, perfectly still, perfectly silent. This was the woman who had said, "You, the driver." The woman who had said, "People like you don't end up speaking French." The woman who had said, "Not bad, don't think." The woman who had laughed with Derek, "If the driver embarrasses himself, that's Thomas's problem." The woman who had called him a bird that can sing but cannot fly. The woman who had chosen Georgetown over the man who had already saved her twice. And now she was watching that man, the driver, the parking guy, the bird, stand in front of 14 delegations and do what no one else in the building could do, while the person she'd chosen instead stood frozen and useless beside him. Caroline Whitfield opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Not because she chose silence, but because, for the first time in her life, she had no words left. His genius didn't just impress her. It left her completely, utterly speechless. Then Caroline did something no one expected, least of all herself. She walked to the podium, stepped into the light. 300 people watching, 14 delegations, every camera in the room. Her hands were shaking. She gripped the edges of the podium to hide it. But her voice betrayed her. For the first time in 25 years of keynotes, board meetings, and investor calls, Caroline Whitfield's voice trembled. 3 weeks ago, she began, this man was driving my car. The room went still. He came to me and offered to help. He said he could speak French. He said he could save a meeting that was falling apart. She paused, swallowed. And I looked at him, at his uniform, at his shoes, and I told him to go back to the car, where he belonged. A murmur passed through the audience, low and heavy. He helped anyway. He walked into that room and saved a €200 million deal that my entire team couldn't save. And when it was over, when he had single-handedly kept this company from going under, do you know what I said to him? She stopped, closed her eyes for half a second. I said, "Not bad. Don't think." And I didn't even say thank you. Silence. The kind that presses against your chest. His name is Langston Harris. He speaks 9 languages. He taught himself every single one. And he just saved this summit, the same way he saved my company 3 weeks ago, while I still couldn't be bothered to trust him. She turned to face him. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. The room erupted. Not politely, not the restrained golf clap of corporate events. A real, full, thundering ovation that rattled the chandeliers of the Kimmel Center. Langston stood at the podium. He didn't move. He didn't wave. He just stood there, holding his leather notebook against his chest, and let the sound wash over him like something he'd been waiting to hear his entire life. After the summit, the Kimmel Center emptied slowly. Delegates lingered. Handshakes lasted longer than usual. People who'd never spoken to Langston before suddenly wanted to know his name. Nina found him near the exit, standing alone, hands still shaking, adrenaline and emotion, and something deeper than both. How do you feel? She asked. He looked at her, then at the empty hall, then back at her. Like I've been holding my breath for 34 years, and I just exhaled. Jean-Luc Renault appeared a few minutes later. He approached Langston and spoke to him in French, a deliberate choice, a gesture of respect between equals. He offered Langston a position, head of multicultural relations for his European investment firm, based in Paris, 6-figure salary, full relocation support. Langston asked, in French, if he could think about it. Jean-Luc smiled. The fact that you're asking me in perfect French tells me you've already decided. Later that afternoon, Thomas Ashford found Langston in the hallway on the ground floor, not in a conference room, not in an office. Thomas came to him, the way he always did. He was holding something, a leather-bound notebook, brand new, high quality. The cover was embossed with 2 gold letters, L.H. The old one got you here, Thomas said. This one's for wherever you go next. Langston held both notebooks in his hands. The old one, worn, cracked, held together with a rubber band, filled with 22 years of handwritten words in 9 languages. And the new one, clean, smooth, waiting to be filled. He placed them side by side. I'm keeping both, he said. Thomas nodded. Of course he was. The next day, Caroline Whitfield asked to see Langston, privately, in her office. No audience, no cameras, just 2 people and a closed door. It wasn't easy. You could see it in the way she stood, arms tight, jaw working, eyes not quite meeting his. I owe you an apology, she said. Not the one I gave on stage. That was for them. This one is for you. She paused. A long pause. I looked at you every day for 3 years, and I didn't see anything but a uniform. I didn't see you. Langston was quiet for a moment. You're not the only one, ma'am. But I should have been better than that. Silence. A long one. Then Langston nodded, slowly. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. A recognition that she was trying, that trying mattered, even when it came late. 1 week later, Caroline sent a company-wide email. In it, she announced the creation of the Whitfield Inclusion and Talent Initiative, a program to identify untapped skills across the company's entire workforce, not just executives, not just people with degrees, everyone. Janitors, security guards, drivers, anyone who had something to offer that nobody had ever thought to ask about. She named Langston Harris as the inspiration. The final line of the email read, "Genius does not come with a title. It comes with a chance to be seen." Derek Caldwell resigned 2 weeks after the summit. No dramatic confrontation, no public humiliation. He simply turned in his badge and walked out, quietly. The way people leave when they know that staying would mean facing, every single day, the living proof of how wrong they were. Nobody fired Derek. Nobody had to. Very few people can survive being publicly proven wrong by the exact person they tried to destroy. What followed was a cascade. The Philadelphia Inquirer ran a feature, The Driver Who Spoke 9 Languages. It went viral in 48 hours. A TED Talk invitation arrived. Langston accepted. The U.S. State Department called. They wanted him to consult on a multilingual outreach initiative. A linguistics professor at the University of Pennsylvania left a voicemail. Mr. Harris, I've been teaching language for 30 years. I'd like to learn how you did it. And on LinkedIn, Langston updated his profile from private driver to cross-cultural strategy consultant, Whitfield Capital Partners. 85,000 connection requests in 2 days. But none of it compared to what happened at a kitchen table in North Philadelphia. Dorothy Harris sat under the same flickering light, glasses at the tip of her nose, the Philadelphia Inquirer open in front of her. She read the line that said, Langston Harris credits his mother, Dorothy, a hospital janitor, for starting his education with a donated French dictionary. She put the paper down, looked at the empty chair across from her. The same chair where a 12-year-old boy once opened a dictionary like it was made of gold. From somewhere deep in her memory, a melody surfaced. A Creole lullaby she used to sing while washing dishes. She hummed it now, softly, without realizing. She didn't say a word. She just cried. Quietly. Proudly. Langston Harris stood in front of a mirror. Not in a parking garage, not in a restroom at the end of a hallway. In an office. His office. 32nd floor. The same floor where a woman in a silk blouse once looked at him in an elevator and stopped smiling. The same floor where the air smelled like expensive cologne and fresh flowers, and a world that had never made room for him. Until now. He adjusted his tie, straightened his collar, ran his hand once across the front of his jacket. His jacket, bought with his first real paycheck, not borrowed, not someone else's. Behind him, through floor-to-ceiling windows, Philadelphia stretched out in golden afternoon light. The same city that had never once looked up at him was now spreading out beneath him like it had been waiting all along. The leather notebook, the old one, the original, sat on his desk. Open to the first page, pencil handwriting, faded but legible. Hello. Thank you. 22 years, 2 words, and everything that grew from them. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother's phone, but the words were Zoe's. Dorothy had typed them out exactly as the little girl dictated, misspellings and all. Daddy, are you still a driver? He smiled, the kind of smile that starts slow and doesn't stop. He typed back with both thumbs. I drive ideas now, baby. He put the phone down, looked out the window, took a long, quiet breath. Somewhere in North Philadelphia, a 6-year-old girl read that message out loud to her grandmother. And Dorothy Harris, standing at the kitchen sink, hands still damp, the same hands that had carried a discarded dictionary home from a hospital donation bin 22 years ago, closed her eyes and whispered something in Creole that only she and God could hear. Here's something most people don't know. There are over 66 million multilingual adults living in the United States right now. 66 million people who speak 2, 3, sometimes 5 or 6 languages fluently, working jobs that never once ask them what they know. Fewer than 20% of American companies have any formal system to identify hidden skills in their own workforce. That means 8 out of 10 companies could have a Langston Harris sitting in their parking garage, their mailroom, their cafeteria, and they would never know, because nobody ever thought to ask. Research from Georgetown University found that informal skills, The kind learned outside classrooms, outside degree programs, outside institutions, are systematically undervalued in hiring, especially for Black and Latino workers, especially for people without credentials, especially for people who look like Langston. The talent is already there. It's always been there. The only question is whether we're willing to see it. So here's what I want you to do. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Think of one person you see regularly but have never really talked to. Your barista, your Uber driver, the security guard who nods at you every morning, the woman who cleans your office after everyone else goes home. Ask them one real question. Not, how are you? Everyone says that and nobody means it. Ask something real, something that tells another human being, I see you, you exist. You might be carrying something extraordinary inside you, and I want to know what it is. You could be standing next to the most remarkable person you've ever met and never know it, simply because you never opened your mouth and asked. And if you run a company, if you have any power at all over who gets seen and who gets overlooked, here's your challenge. Audit your people. Not their resumes, not their degrees, their actual, real, living skills. Build a system where someone can tell you what they know, not just what their job title says they do. Langston Harris didn't need a degree. He didn't need a credential. He needed a door. Just one door. Be the door. If this story moved you, leave a comment. Tell me about a time you were underestimated, or a time you underestimated someone else. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And subscribe, because stories like this aren't rare. We're just not telling them enough. 8 words. Take them with you wherever you go. Genius doesn't need a title. It needs a witness.
Can I be honest with you for a second? You don't need anyone's permission to grow. You don't need a fancy school. You don't need money. You don't need someone important to tap you on the shoulder and say, okay, now you are allowed to be smart. You just start with whatever you have, whatever you are. And the world might not notice for a long time, maybe years, maybe decades. And that doesn't mean you stop. You keep going because you are not doing it for them. You are doing it for the day when the moment comes, and it always comes. And you're ready, not kind of ready, fully ready, because you never start. And here's the thing, people will always try to put you in the box. You are just driver, you are just cleaner, you are just, let them think whatever they want, because a box only holds you if you believe you belong in it, and you don't. So whatever you're building right now, keep building. The world doesn't owe you a stage, but when you build long enough, the stage finds you. Like, share, and subscribe. Every week, real stories, real justice. And remember, genius doesn't need a title. It needs time. Give yourself that time.